terms of video games, I'd say 2021 was a pretty good year. We didn't have a bunch of groundbreaking releases like 2017, but 2017 was kind of the perfect storm for gaming, and I do think there was enough good stuff this year to satisfy all different types of video game fans. I didn't play a ton of games that were from this year, but I did play a good amount of older games. I of course caught up on some games from the previous year, like Yakuza 7, didn't finish that game, but I enjoyed what I played. I did finish 13 Sentinels though, and that was a pretty solid time. Background art was beautiful, the music was super good, and I only understood about 50% of the story. If you're a big fan of sci-fi junk, you're going to have a field day with this game, and if you're a visual novel / adventure game fan, you've got a fun road ahead with decent enough combat in between. I finally got around to playing Ghost Trick, and wow, how did I skip out on this game for so long. Any fan of Shuto Kumi's work, aka the original Asteria trilogy, owes it to themselves to play this game. It's one of my favorite visual novels of all time. I made a video on the game way earlier in the year, and I also made one for One Shot, and damn, I feel like I love that game even more now. It's hard to explain, but it's just a really endearing game, bursting with life, and I can't help but be attached to its little world. It was amazing seeing the game be announced for consoles, since I thought that would never happen, but I am so hyped to see my pal Nico once again. Oh, and what's probably one of my biggest gaming highlights of the year, I did a full replay of Undertale, getting both the neutral and, for the first time, the pacifist ending, and man, after all these years, I finally love this game an absurd amount just like everyone else. I already loved it for my first playthrough, but now that love is through the roof, y'all! Alright, enough about older stuff I played. What I really want to talk about today is all the new games I managed to get through. There are still some games from this year that I never got the chance to try out, like Nier Replicant, and I still don't have a PS5 to play the new Ratchet & Clank, but we'll try to work with what we got. Here's my top 10 favorite games of 2021. Also, I'd just like to say that while these are ranked, a number of the places can easily be swapped around. It doesn't really mean that much. I just want to talk about video games. After a series of hit or miss titles, Mario Party has finally returned in a safe but successful way. Taking parts from the first 3 games, plus minigames across the entire series, Mario Party Superstars captures a similar energy to the classic games that many have been oh so longing for. Partying with a group of fans and letting the chaos ensue as you collect coins, stars, and getting overly competitive in the minigames is the most fun I've had with a multiplayer game all year. From my experiences with the game, I've learned that boards like Peach's Birthday Cake and Yoshi's Tropical Island are usually kinda me. Meanwhile, Spaceland is a board that hates my guts, and I foolishly believe there's a chance for me to change that every time I play it. Regardless though, playing through a board with friends usually brings the fun memories, and that's now much easier to do because this game is the first Mario Party to actually have an online system built in day one, and with actual boards instead of just minigames alone. Why did they think that was a good idea for Mario Party? Super Mario Party, what? These all have the same name! But for real, I'm glad to finally have a means of playing the game easily with friends, and the online is surprisingly decent for what it is. It's not the perfect Mario Party though. Having only 5 boards is pretty weak for a game taking designs from earlier games, and there's a number of minigames I wish they didn't bring back, but at the very least, it does seem like there are plans for DLC, and if it means we get more boards, I'll be more than satisfied. If you got a group of friends that are craving some classic Mario Party chaos, it's hard to go wrong with this game. Mario Party is back, and I love it! Until I get my star stolen. And then I hate it. Persona 5 sure got its number of spin-off titles, huh? I haven't tried many out except for both Persona 5 Royal, which I have yet to get far in, but I did finish what's essentially the sequel to Persona 5, Persona 5 Strikers, and I am so glad I did. Admittedly, this game took quite a bit of time for me to get through, as I was very on and off with playing it, since the first third of this game had a hard time really grabbing me, but once things start to get going, oh did this game get fun. Combining both the hack and slash chaos of a Musou game with the strategic RPG mechanics of a Persona game made for such a cool battle system that's flashy, satisfying, and is also accompanied by some rocking tunes, because while this game's soundtrack is full of bangers and goes toe to toe with the original Persona 5. I'd say that goes for the writing and story as well. It's not an incredible story, as it hits a lot of similar beats of its predecessor, and can get pretty repetitive at points, but the exchanges between all the characters continue to be as sharp as ever, with new faces that are sure to become fan favorites. Sophie was a really good addition that brought out her own charm, but Senkichi was what really sold me on this game's story. Without spoiling anything, he was definitely my favorite part of this whole game, and if you know, you know. And of course, the visuals and presentation find new ways to be pure eye candy, but after the original game, is that really a surprise? It may not be for every Persona fan due to its switch from turn-based to action, but if you're willing to play it, you're sure to find something here that you'll love. Survival horror is a genre I became a huge fan of starting in early 2020, and a large part of that was definitely because of Resident Evil. I played through the 2 remake, 7, and 4, and I loved all of them. So you bet I was excited for Resident Evil 8, and let me tell ya, it didn't disappoint. Acting as a follow-up to 7, Village continues the first-person perspective and style of horror that game set, while also mixing in some elements of Resident Evil 4, such as the attaché case and the Return of the Merchant system. There's also a higher focus on the combat and action. It's still very much a survival horror game at its core, with tons of exploration and resource management, but it's only a bit less scary than 7. Except for the one part in the basement, because holy crap, that baby haunts my soul. I was already a fan of 7's setting, but Resident Evil 8's choice of a mountainous region full of all these unique locations was definitely a treat to explore, especially with how the time of day would change over the course of the game. I thought the story of this game was pretty decent. It's still about as ridiculous as you would expect from Resident Evil, but we got some fun new characters to take on. I know everyone went absolutely nuts over Lady Dimitrescu, but one of my favorites ended up being Donna Beneviento, because I love hallucinations and stuff like that as a set piece for horror. As far as Resident Evils go, this is definitely in my top 3. I know that may not be saying much because I've only played like 4 games total, but they're good games, alright? In the time people have been waiting for Metroid Prime 4 to become a reality, we got a whole new 2D Metroid game by the people behind the Metroid 2 remake on the 3DS, Metroid Dread, and it's by far my favorite Metroid game I played. I haven't been too big into Metroid over the years, despite the fact that I love Metroidvanias. I played some of the beloved titles like Super, Zero Mission, and Prime, but I never finished them. I respected and appreciated a lot about them, but either didn't have enough interest to get far, or I just got lost like an idiot. But Metroid Dread though, this game had me hooked all the way through until the end. Samus feels incredible to play as in this game, making maneuvering through this delicately constructed labyrinth of a planet as satisfying as possible. A lot of Metroid tropes you've come to know, like discovering upgrades, facing perilous threats, and discovering new locations are back, but executed in such a refined and polished way. The best bosses I've seen in the series too, like, wow, these are dang good 2D bosses that put your reflexes and knowledge of the game to the test. And that final boss too, it was so much fun. I wasn't quite sure how I was going to feel about the enemies as enemies that relentlessly follow you through said locations, but I ended up finding them a pretty cool roadblock that forced you to make the most out of your abilities. I did unfortunately find them a bit annoying at points, and the process of taking them down got a bit repetitive, but that's all minor stuff compared to how simply fun it is to play this game. I totally understand why so many constantly go back to replay this game, to get better speedrun times and pull off sequence breaks, knowing how much people love to replay the older Metroid games. I'm sure Dread will have a similar life. Metroid truly is back, and that feels great to say. Well, ain't this game familiar here, huh? Sometimes all it takes is a unique premise to get me interested in a game, and Chicory, A Colorful Tale, is one of those games. To keep it brief, since I already made a video on this game, Chicory is a 2D adventure game where you use a magical brush to paint the world around you, as well as navigate yourself through its more treacherous areas. The big appeal of this game being how much fun you can have painting all your environments, and the really endearing story this game tells. Oh, and also the fact that this game's OST was done by the same composer who did Celeste's OST. So yeah, I was says I love this game's OST from the get-go. A lot of really nice and calming tracks are in this game, with some that are still capable of setting that dangerous and energetic mood. Going around the map and coloring every little area how I wanted, whether clean or really dumb, it was an extremely pleasant experience that I really loved, but what I was really taken aback by was how much I liked the story. It's nothing too complicated, but the interactions between all the characters and the journey our main character goes on, and how that bounces off of Chicory's development, is handled well. Both of them have different kinds of struggles, but still manage to help each other out and grow as people. Despite the very cutesy presentation, the story can feel very mature, not extremely dark or messed up, but knows the kind of themes and messages it wants to tell, and I have a lot of respect for that. If this game has caught your interest, it wouldn't hurt to try it yourself. It recently got a Switch port too with gyro controls implemented, and while the PC controls are the safest way to go, I am kinda curious to know how that game feels to play on the Switch, so I might just double dip, who knows. If there was one game that released in 2021 that took over my life at the beginning of the year, it was Little Nightmares 2. Little Nightmares 1 is the game I still hold a lot of appreciation for, even with the longest load times that I had to suffer through on the Switch, but Little Nightmares 2 was such a big improvement, even if it's still fundamentally the same kind of game. You're still going to be doing the usual platforming and puzzle solving, but the controls feel so much smoother, there was way more interesting level design and mechanics, and the story leaves tons more to sink your teeth into and dissect, while still being fairly minimal. If you love the monsters in the first game, Little Nightmares 2 will give you a ton to gawk at. From the disturbing stiff face of the teacher to the jittery mannequins in the hospital, you'll be both fascinated and creeped out as you sneak by them like the helpless child you are. I'll tell ya, journeying through this horrifically beautiful world was an experience unlike any other. There were so many times I simply wanted to take in the landscapes given. Not only are they gorgeous, but I also can't help but be fascinated from trying to understand how these areas ended up how they are. I immediately went back to replay this whole game after I finished it, and then again right after that, and then maybe another time the week after. If you want a short but incredibly thought-provoking and replayable little horror game, I cannot recommend Little Nightmares 2 enough. It feels weird how it's already been 3 years since the first chapter of Deltarune dropped, being this really cool demo that left many speculating on where it would go. Well, in September, we finally got our answer, as Toby and his team finally finished the second part of his ongoing project. And let me tell ya, it was freaking worth the wait, man. Deltarune Chapter 2 is the most pure fun I've had with the game all year. The battle system is neatly refined with some of the best bosses Toby has ever designed, the music still remains stuck in my head, and the writing is just as lovable as before, while somehow being even more hilarious. Even with all my multiplayer fun, this chapter is straight up the most the game has ever made me laugh this year, and I'm sure everyone has their own moment that made them burst into uncontained laughter. The night that this chapter dropped was quite possibly my most memorable one all year. Yes, I'm boring. I was glued to this game well into the late night, and I have no regrets. Even afterwards, there was so much to take in and secrets to uncover, many of which reveal a darker layer to this game that may allude to where the story will be going. I already made a video into that topic if you want to check that out, but that's how obsessed I was with this chapter. I had so much to say and discuss with this game and share it, and I just really love Deltarune, man. Oh my god. If you loved Undertale and still have yet to give Deltarune a try, get on it already. It's still going to be quite a while until Deltarune's finished, but the conversations will still be kicking all throughout, so might as well jump in while you can. Psychonauts 1 was a game that I appreciated from its inventive world and levels to the really charming characters and writing, but I never got around to finishing it, probably due to a lack of motivation, but mostly because I didn't feel like setting up my PS3 again since that was the system I had it on. I eventually did buy it on Steam and played it there, so I did come around to loving that game. The best part about finally finishing that game, however, was that I can move on to Psychonauts 2, and god damn is this game a masterpiece of a sequel. You can really feel all the modern improvements when going straight from 1 to 2. A lot of your psychic abilities have been streamlined and smoothed out, so that not only are they good for puzzle solving and traversal, they're also now heavily incorporated into the combat system, making it some of the most refined and inventive I've ever played in a platformer. Zipping all over the place and countering whatever your enemies throw at you while dishing out your own attacks is such a fun loop to get into that I never got sick of. It also has what's probably my favorite story and writing I've ever seen in a platformer, because wow is Psychonauts 2's narrative such a clean continuation of the first. A lot of characters you know and love return, with Raz still being one of the most lovable little protagonists ever, but plot points from the first game that were simply there as background elements for characters start to take the forefront and get fully fleshed out into these awesome reveals. There's also still tons of new interesting characters that you really get a great insight into due to all the new amazing minds that you'll be exploring, with visuals that I'm still stunned at from their creativity, and it's just, god, this game is so cool. The character designs aren't for everyone, but they sure as hell are for someone like me, because I'm always so fascinated by how unique in structure and form many of them are, and this also applies to the different environments. You'll be hard pressed to find many places in this game that feel generic or uninspired. Psychonauts 2 is simply a game brimming with creativity and life all throughout, and it's one of the best 3D platformers I have ever played. Any fan of platformers or adventure games should absolutely give both of these games a try. I had never had to wait all these years for 2 to release, but I hope for those who did, this game was well worth the wait. Now here's something I thought would never happen. Ace Attorney is one of my favorite series of all time that I adore so much about, but when talking about my favorites, I would usually say the Diagagaton Saibon duology, or what is now the Great Ace Attorney. I'd also say Investigations 2, but we're not talking about that right now, so yeah. These two games have been Japanese exclusive for so long and stuck on the 3DS, so all my hope for localization became non-existent due to how many hurdles that would take, both legally and content-wise. I had to experience the game through fan translations and such, but it was this year that a miracle finally happened, and the West could properly play Shu Takumi's latest finger-pointing adventure with the Great Ace Attorney Chronicles. And what an adventure it was, because oh my god, these games are like my favorite visual novels of all time. Taking place in Meiji era Japan and Victoria era London, the great Ace Attorney tells the tale of Ryanosuke Naruhodo as he journeys to London to become an attorney with his legal assistant Suzato as they meet Sherlock Holmes, or Herlock Sholmes, and solve a number of different murder cases. All the while, greater mysteries are slowly being developed, showing a dark side of London's past that's connected to us more than we could ever expect. The two games tell a singular story, with mysteries that will be set up in the first game and then answered in the second. The cast of characters featured in this game is absolutely lovely. I thought the cast in the mainland game started to get way too crowded by the 6th game, but this game being a completely new start allowed for some really clean and well done development for many of the characters, while doing some really creative and awesome twists with some of them. My favorites were definitely characters like Herlock, Naruhodo, and Asogi. Naruhodo manages to capture a lot of what I loved about Phoenix, while developing really differently compared to him, and becoming that skilled attorney in his own way. The animation of this game is phenomenal, even for Ace Attorney standards. It's not the overly flashy and in-your-face kind of animation, but there's so much detail put into every expression and mannerism that it makes all these characters feel truly alive. And the same applies to the music, because holy Jesus Christ, this duology has one of my favorite video game OSTs, compositions that are very true to previous games, but using both Japanese and European inspiration for the instruments, with tons of different leitmotifs used throughout so many songs to create this cohesiveness, and it's just injected into my veins. Whether you're an Ace Attorney fan or not, this game is absolutely worth a shot for any fan of story-driven games. It's a completely separate story from the rest of the series, so you're free to jump in and have the time of your life yelling objection. Truth be told, I wasn't even sure if I was going to include this game in this video. Probably because it technically released in 2020, but I mean that was December 25th, so it really could count here for all we care. But mainly, I just wasn't confident if I could really talk about this game how I feel like I wanted to. Either way, I will do my best to express what I can. Alright, Amore is an indie RPG where you take control of a kid named, well, Amore, as you explore a dream world that will bring about many different vibrant locations with a combat system themed around emotions and which ones counter which. The cast is made up of a lovable group of childhood friends, and there's a ton of fun little interactions between them and many weird NPCs. There's a bunch of fun visuals, music, and overall, I feel it's a pretty fun game. Amore is also an indie RPG where you take control of a kid named Sunny, and instead of exploring a dream world, you experience the weird world that forms those dreams, where you start to understand what the heck is really going on with this game's story. There's some mysteries, character drama, surreal imagery, oh, and some pretty dark stuff that fits the trigger warnings at the beginning of the game. You know what? I don't think this is working. Amore is very much a game I recommend going completely blind in, and trying to explain this game while skimming around spoilers isn't going to cut it. So let's try this instead. My goal here isn't to sell anyone on Amore, but to share how much this game has meant to me. Amore is honestly one of the most emotional experiences I've had with the game, and a piece of media in general. The story this game tells, and the journey you go on to understand that story, to learn what the hell is the point of Sunny's whole headspace, and the point of this whole game, it really clicked with me. I have no clever way of explaining why. I found it endearing, gripping, and heartbreaking by the end. The finale and ending to this game was the first and only time a game, no, a piece of media, has ever brought me to crying. Not just eyes watering or a few tears, like actually crying. And it was so weird. That never happened to me before, but it also felt kind of liberating as well. It wasn't all doom and gloom either. The ending still had this sense of hope and optimism, that even in the worst situations, even when you mentally feel like there's no escape from the ugliest and most terrifying thoughts your brain can create, it's still possible to break free from them and continue living. That part of your brain will never succumb, so neither should you. Being honest, you can switch the number 1 and number 2 spots of this video, and it really wouldn't make much of a difference. Hell, you could put Psychonauts 2 as number 1. I love these games about as much, but I put Amore here because it was the most relevant game to me this year, whereas a game like Great Ace Attorney meant the most to me last year. Because of Amore, I feel I met some really cool people who I would talk endlessly to on Discord, dissecting the game and its writing piece by piece, appreciating every little part of this game's characters, and messaging so much that it would go well into the night, ruining my sleep schedule, but I just didn't care. That Amore high I was on was some of the most bliss I had all year. Is it a perfect game? Absolutely not. I could write pages about the things I dislike, but I could also write endlessly about the things I loved. Every little problem I have with this game, it doesn't matter. It never truly did. Amore left its mark on me regardless. It gave me an experience I will never forget, nor would I want to. And really, that's how I know I love a video game. That's how I know it's my favorite game of 2021. Well, that seems like a good place to call it. If you've enjoyed your time at all, subscribing, liking, all that junk would be very appreciated. I got a number of videos at this point where I talk about games and other stuff like shows and comics. A bunch of credits for footage and music I use in this video will be in the description. With all that said, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you around.